All right, so today we are talking about how I get my snare sound. I've been flattered to see enough comments asking about my tuning and how I set snares up that I figured it'd be appropriate to bring you along for the ride while I set this snare up. So if you have a snare that you want to set up and try and get a similar sound that I've been getting in my videos, now's the time. So grab your snare and you can follow along with me. We're going to go basically from the ground up. We're going to leave the heads on, but we're going to take the snare wires off and make sure that the snare wires are set up correctly, because that's a really important part of the sound. That'll give you like tunebot readings and that sort of thing so that you can reference my pitches and my tunings to see if you want to match it yourself. So in any case, while I flip this over here, first thing I'm going to do before I take the snare wires off is I am going to take off some tension on my throw off here. So I wanna make sure, like right now, my throw off is about as tight as it can go. That is usually a problem. So I want to have leeway on both sides. I wanna be able to loosen it to get my snares looser, and then I also wanna have some room to tighten it if I need to. Right now, this is kind of all the way tight, and we don't want that to be the case. So I'm going to loosen this. And then on the other side, this is a DW throw. It's gonna be a little bit different for everyone. This butt plate lets you choose either tighter, medium, or loose. I'm gonna keep it in the medium position. While I am just removing the snare wires here, I'll just tell you real quick about this drum. It certainly looks like a DW, but this was actually put together by my dad to match one of my kits. We were able to source some DW lugs. In fact, we were able to source some actual DW African Chechen. They were super cool and let us take some African Chechen to use as the outer veneer. So anyways, taking the snare wires off, and what I want to do here before I reset these snares is I actually want to take this like cord off of here. I'm going to replace that with grosgrain ribbon. Grosgrain ribbon I like because it doesn't have the tendency to slip, but it also has a little bit of give so that it's not holding the snare wires too aggressively, if that makes any sense at all. All right, so you can see the butt end here, and the first thing I wanna do is I wanna put the ribbon through, and I wanna make sure that my snare wires are going to be centered once they're tight. And I know that the one side that isn't going to move for most drums is on the butt plate side. So I want to put this through, and then I want to look at the snare wires here and make sure that when this is tight, when this is held completely taut, I'm just gonna hold it taut with my hand. When that's tight, I want that to be centered in between the two ends of the shells. Okay, I'm gonna get that in place, hold it taut. Then I'm going to tighten up these screws. Okay, so that's held tight, so that shouldn't be a problem. Now the other side, this is what seems to confuse a lot of people, and if you're having a hard time getting a good snare sound, it very much could be this. It could be the other side. So remember that on the throw-off side, I loosened it so that I have room to tighten or loosen my snare. So what some people do is they'll put the throw-off off, and then they'll put the ribbon on, they'll attach the snare wires, and then they'll go like this, and it'll be way too tight. So what we're gonna do, and what works for me in most cases with most throw-offs, is I'm going to hold it tight while the throw is engaged, and then I'm going to do the rest of the tightening with the actual tension little knob thing here. So I can go ahead and just sneak that where it's supposed to go. Just going to pull that through, and now what I can do is I'm just gonna pull that tight, basically as tight as I can pull it, and then I'm going to use my other hand and I'm going to screw it in. All right, so our snare wires should be good. Now I want to check the pitches of both heads. So first thing I'm gonna do is check the bottom head, and I haven't loosened this. I'm not putting a brand new head on here, but what I'm gonna do is I'm going to pull up the snare wires here. I'm gonna put a stick under there just to keep them out of the way. And I'm just gonna hit it, do a little kind of rim shot with my fingers here, John Good style. And I will check the bottom head tension and pitch in a couple of different ways. I don't typically use a tune bot. I sort of go by ear and I go by feel. So most of my snares are tuned slightly differently. They're not tuned exactly the same, but just because I've done it enough and I sort of have my tendencies. So in any case, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just feel around the edges and feel if any of these seem looser than the others. And I'm definitely noticing a few tension rods here, a few lugs that feel a little bit looser. So I'm just gonna bring those up. Of course, if I was bringing this head up from scratch, I would go in a star pattern. It's not quite as important once it's already got a decent amount of tension on it. And for my bottom head, I go quite tight. That is all I can say here. And actually, I'll give you a TuneBot reading so you can see exactly where it's at. But I will go quite tight and I will tune mostly by feel. Then I'll kind of hit. And I want it to sound like a fairly highly tuned timbale. That is really what I'm looking for. I'm going partially by feel and then partially by just giving it that little finger rim shot and seeing if that sounds about right to my ear. So that sounds about right to me. Sometimes I'll go lower if I'm going for a lower tuning, but let me grab the TuneBot and let's see what the reading is. Okay, all right, so I've got the TuneBot on here and I am showing, all right, so I'm getting a reading of 210 hertz pitch at the lug, so take that for what it's worth. Now let's move to the top head and we'll do something similar here. So I'm just gonna check and see if any of these sound lower to me than others, and this one certainly does. Same sort of thing with the top head, where I'll typically go for kind of a medium-high tuning for general purposes. Now, if I'm recording or doing a particular track, of course, that all goes out the window and it could be a totally different tuning. But if I'm just doing like a YouTube demo or something, I'll usually go for what I consider like a medium-high tuning. All right, so that's pretty much where I like it. I know I'm not giving you extensive tuning techniques. That would be another subject, that would be another video, which I'm happy to do if you like. But I'm assuming that you basically know how to tune your drums and that you're just kind of looking for maybe how I do it specifically. So let's see what my top pitch is. Okay, so the top head, interestingly, I'm getting a reading of 321 hertz. It was also showing me 121 and 212, which is very similar to the bottom head. I have had some issues with the TuneBot sometimes where I'm getting what are probably different octaves, or it's noticing different aspects of the head pitch. But all I can do is just give you those two readings that I'm seeing here, and hopefully that's helpful to you. What's most helpful to me, honestly, in matching and pitch matching drums is just to hear a reference. So let me just give you a sound reference. I'll bring it up to the microphone here. Let me just give you a sound reference of the top head and the bottom head. Okay, so hopefully that helps you. The last step here is to just make sure that our snare wires are adjusted properly, and this is a big one for me. At least for me personally, I notice even really great drummers and drummers that are great techs as well, sometimes messing this up or doing their own thing. The way that I prefer to do this is to engage the snare wires, and because I tightened it by hand, they're really not tight enough. They're not as tight as they should be. But remember, we loosened the snare throw off before, so I've got this extra room to tighten the snare wires. So here's what I want. Here's what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get to the point where I can tap really lightly and still hear snare sound. And then I'm gonna try and find the point at which when I'm tapping really, really lightly, I hear the pitch of the drum head instead of the snares. That's the point at which the snare wires are getting choked, and that's what we want to avoid. So I want full sensitivity down to my lowest dynamic. So I'm just gonna tap and tighten the wires. Okay, can you hear that? Right there, when I'm tapping really lightly, I'm hearing the pitch of the drum, not the wire. So what I want is to back off. Right about there, right to when I get the point where when I'm tapping my lightest, I'm still hearing just snares. I'm right up to the point of it choking out. So let's see what it sounds like. So hopefully that helps. I will just reiterate that this is one particular tuning. This is just like my kind of standard general all-purpose demoing a snare tuning, but I do a lot of different tunings depending on the situation. I'll use muffling, when the situation calls for it. This is totally unmuffled with a coated Remo ambassador on the top and a hazy ambassador on the bottom. So feel free to ask questions in the comment section. If you have any, you are more than welcome, of course, to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.